Everyone, thanks for joining us today for the last Public Humanities Lunch Talk of the summer. We're really pleased to have Phaedra here to talk about the docent program at the National Taiwan Museum and tell us a little bit about the work of the museum itself. Sharon Lin, who just graduated with her MA degree from our department, will be introducing Phaedra. I'm Marissa Brown, the Assistant Director for Programs at the John Nicholas Brown Center for Public Humanities and Cultural Heritage. One other quick note about questions. So Phaedra's presentation will be about 25-30 minutes, and then we've got about half an hour for questions and conversation. The easiest way to do this will be if you have a question or a comment, put it into the chat box. You don't have to tell me what it is, but just say, hey, I've got a question, and I'll chat back to you and let you know what number in the queue you are, and then I will unmute you so that you can ask it once we get there. I'll turn it over to Sharon. Thanks a lot, Phaedra, for being here, especially given the time difference. Thanks a lot. Okay, Sharon.
Okay, great. So it's actually now 11:30 p.m. in Taiwan. So thank you, Phaedra, for joining us. So Phaedra is the Curatorial Associate in the Education Department of the National Taiwan Museum, and also the Secretary of the Committee for Museums and Collections of Natural History of the International Council of Museums. She comes with a background in life science education and environmental education, and is now pursuing her PhD at the International Program of Climate Change and Sustainable Development at National Taiwan University. I got to know Phaedra when I was an international docent at the museum, which is a program that she'll be talking more about today. I was part of the 2017 cohort of docents, where I worked alongside peers from 12 other countries. Phaedra is both a supervisor and a friend, and she's dedicated to creating a welcoming environment for museum goers and docents alike, and often connect us docents to various cultural and educational programs and organize field trips to learn more about Taiwan and reflect on our own culture. The International Docent Training Program at the National Taiwan Museum is constantly evolving, reflecting new understandings and input each year. In her free time, Phaedra plays badminton, cook, and make zongzi, which are traditional Taiwanese rice dumplings, and they're really delicious. So welcome, Phaedra.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you, Brown University, for inviting me to this very special occasion. It's my first time doing this. And so should I share my screen right now? Should I share the screen?
Yeah, sure. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Ooh. Okay. So thank you, Sharon, for your introduction. And today I'm going to introduce the International Docent Training Program at the museum that I organized. And before I actually introduce this program, I would like to introduce the background of the museum. So here you see a picture. It's an imaginary picture by a very famous cultural heritage expert in Taiwan called Li Qianlang. He basically drew all branches of our museum into one picture. And the one at the end of the road is our main building. So our museum is really interesting because it is so far the oldest museum still standing in Taiwan. And a little introduction about a National Taiwan Museum system that I will do at the beginning, and then I will share with you why I started the program and what we are doing in the program and some challenges and prospects. So first about our museum. If you have never been to Taiwan, you probably would know that Taipei is the capital of Taiwan, and our museum sits right at the very popular center of Taipei City. It's very close to Taipei Main Station, and in the picture at your right, you can see an orange circle that covers, the major settlements of Taipei City, and our museum is at one of the three major settlements, the walled city founded during Qing Dynasty in late 19th century. And the walled city is circled by the yellow dotted line here, and that's where our museum is. And some very interesting news about our museum. So our museum was actually founded by the Japanese during the Japanese colonial period. If you know that Taiwan has actually been under the Japanese colonization for 50 years until the World War II in 1945, when the Japanese lost the second World War II. And after the World War II, Taiwan was taken over by the Chinese nationalist government of the Republic of China. That then was at the mainland China. And so they came, and basically you can imagine that Taiwan has been through several different colonizers. So in the past, it was the Westerners, and then the Qing government, and then the Japanese, and then comes the Chinese nationalist government. So there are some problems with the cultural heritage in Taiwan. A lot of the very old buildings, they were built during the Japanese colonial period. After World War II, they had to be transferred into the Chinese nationalist government as their property. But after war, there are a lot of things that the government had to fix, and they didn't have enough cash. So for a lot of cultural heritage sites, they could be sold to private sectors, or they could be damaged during the bombing in 1945 because, well, we used to be one of the colonies of Japan, so we are at the Axis power, unfortunately. And so a lot of cultural heritage were actually destroyed or during the bombing, and they couldn't really have enough budget to fix those cultural heritage, the monuments, to its original, design. For example, the presidential office in the picture at your right, it is the president's office of Taiwan. It is still standing, but because some of part was severely damaged during the bombing, so the government, after the post-war, they decided to fix it in a cheaper way. That happened to a lot of museums. And another example, for example, the first ever department store of Taiwan, the Kikumoto department store, which is also very close to our museum because it was sold to private sectors. So the private sectors didn't want to continue, this building as a cultural heritage. They want to build it into a probably modern commercial building, but they didn't really have enough money to do it. So right now, the cultural heritage, the monument, is covered with glass curtain. But what about our museum? Our museum is in a much better situation. It wasn't bombed, actually, which is quite surprising because it should be the target. But it wasn't bombed, it wasn't destroyed during the bombing, but because it was kind of like a relic from the Japanese colonial government. So after war, the government, they decided to build their own museums that would represent the true Chinese culture at the time when the Republic of China government was actually competing a seat in the United Nations with the People's Republic of China in mainland. So they have their own ideology, and therefore our museum had fallen into a very awkward state where, people don't really know what it is for. It is what it looked like when it was built, after a few years after it was built, and after war, it was treated as a venue for all kinds of exhibitions that failed to find a place in Taipei. So you see, they tried to cover it up. And for example, this is also one of the examples. So finally, when the Taiwanese local cultural heritage expert, they have started a kind of movement to call for, cultural revival or for the local culture instead of looking for culture that's outside Taiwan. So more and more cultural heritage that still survived started to be emphasized. For example, our museum is one of the examples that the Ministry of Culture at that time, it had a different name. They wanted to invest more money to build it and help this museum to find its new purpose. And so that was when our museum initiated a project called National Taiwan Museum System. We are trying to build a system to find a new role for this museum. Although it used to be a relic for the Japanese colonial government, but we can still use the building and also its collection to emphasize the cultural subjectivity of Taiwan. We can have a more reflexive view on, the past history. We don't have to praise the colonizers, but we can keep them and we can look back on those history. So this is why we started this project. But the problem is that we don't have enough space. This is a very small museum, I have to tell you. And awkwardly, our museum owns the building, but we do not own where the building sits, which is the park. The property of the park belongs to Taipei city government, while the museum belongs to central government. So we actually have to pay rent, a lot of rent to Taipei city government every year. So it's very difficult for us to expand our space. So what we found to solve this problem is to find other cultural heritage sites in the vicinity and try to renovate them and also repurpose them. So this is the walled city where our museum sits. And as you can see, the red spots indicates all our branches. So we were looking for nearby cultural heritage sites and renovate them and repurpose them. That's what we do. So we are not just renovating our own main building. We also renovate a cultural heritage site opposite our building, which used to be a bank building. And we use the very elevated space to exhibit dinosaurs. So it becomes a natural history branch. And we also renovate the camphor factory nearby and exhibit the industrial history of Taiwan. So it used to be a factory. It is like a haunted house, and then we spent around 8 years of renovation. And now it's the Beimen Park or Beimen Branch. And we also have been renovating a fourth branch called Beimen Branch. It used to be the railway department park from actually since Qing Dynasty. And also the Japanese period and also the post-war period, they all use this place as the office for the railway department. So we renovate this old building into this, and now it's our fourth branch, and it just opened last month. So basically, we are using different cultural heritage sites to present the different stories, different aspects of Taiwan to enhance the cultural subjectivity of Taiwan. And this is our story. And so it comes to the second part of our talk. Why did I start the international docent training program? It's because actually we see that if you can introduce all these branches, you get a very interesting story of how Taipei or modern Taiwan was founded. And recently, there are a lot of popular walking tours in Taipei city. And sometimes they will stop by our museum, and I will just, overhear their guided tours. And I found there are so many mistakes, unfortunately. And also, they didn't really get the essence of these architecture because they are not obviously experts about these cultural heritage. So they will just say something, introduce something very general. And I think it's a shame. It's a pity. So I think, well, why not start a English tour by ourselves? So that's what I started. And you can see in this picture, Sharon is in the center. And so we started the program in 2017. And so we do have some demand, like we don't have enough English docents, like docents or tour guides of our museum that can speak in English. We don't have many of them. And also we don't have participation from younger generation. And also because we don't have young people, that many young people joining our museum. And so I always feel if I talk with my friends, a lot of people don't really know where our museum is. And, you know, this is because of the historic background I just introduced you, because in the past, the government thought the museum was just a relic of the Japanese colonial period. So for a long time, it wasn't advertised as much as other museums. And so I want to increase exposure among young and international populations. And also, I've discovered that in the universities in Taipei, even the major universities, they offer very few courses in English to introduce Taiwan's culture and history. And so I think our museum can serve that purpose. So this is why I started this program. So in our program, we'll be introducing, you know, Taiwan's modern history with our museum architectures and museum's background history. Okay, so this is one of the batch. And so from 2017 to 2019, we have trained over 100 students from 22 different countries. And, you know, some of the pictures that we are training, we'll train them with service skills, you know, how to deal with difficult customers. And we also train them to give, you know, guided tours. I know this is a very cheesy picture at the right. They felt very cheesy when they were doing this poster, but I think it's very interesting. This is the first batch of our international docents. So we actually have docents, students from very different backgrounds. And so, well, we've been, you know, organizing this, and also local TV news, they have discovered our story. So this is one of the news report that they interviewed us.
清朝北门日本时期的铁道部这历史古迹就挖伫台北车站，国立台湾博物馆透过每个月举办的散步导览，分享台北城的诞生甲发展。
So they could not choose either at 大稻埕 or 梦港。我们一开始是希望可以推台博馆的系统建筑，所以从本馆，然后
So I think this is me. I'm going to skip it. I'm just going to show you this. Some of our docents.
Why there was such an abundance of Western style buildings in Taiwan.
日本时期所建造的台湾博物馆有大英博物馆的影子，这是当时领地为新的西化效应伫台湾内体现。
欧洲人看台湾应该不太知道，这里也有很多古迹啊，然后有很复杂的历史。所以我觉得这个是一个应该要强调的地方。
Because I can look differently all the building in Taipei and understand the organization of the city, and yes, that's very interesting for me to understand my environment here.
历史增添社区的理感，导览也好更加多人会了解台北市的深度。记者综合报道。
Okay, so I'll just jump to the next one. So what do we do in the program? As you can see, we do tours. So we have weekly tours in English to introduce the main building only. So this is Sharon again. And also because a lot of our docents are from different nationalities, they have their own native language. So sometimes we'll try to organize the tour in their own native language. So this is some of the different languages we have been organized, different language tours we've been organized. So including French, Japanese, German, Thai, Korean, Spanish, Russian, and Indonesian, Italian. Yeah, so this is, and in the middle, it is our art designer. She is really talented to be able to design all these banners. And in addition to just a weekly tour, we are also receiving tour groups from different places. It could be from the local schools like National Taiwan University or National Taipei University, National Zhengzhi University, or groups from Thailand or Colombia, or even public sectors, or some international representative office in Taiwan, like the Moscow representatives, or the other international museum groups. And the docents, they can also participate in our outreach events. Like at the picture at the left, they were actually preparing the souvenir for one of our special exhibition on elephant. And the picture at the top right, it is our Sustainable New Year's Table event. It is regularly held before the Lunar New Year's Eve, and so our director in the middle is cooking, and one of our docents is the MC of this event. And also, we have come up with more events because we thought we discovered that the multicultural backgrounds of our international docent team is a merit of this program, because we get to learn a lot of things from our docents, not just from the materials that I prepared, but from docents. For example, if we have Korean students, they can compare why in Taiwan we actually choose to keep all those Japanese colonial buildings, while in Korea they actually choose to destroy them. And also, well, we can see like colonial architectures or natural history collections. We can compare them among different regions. So we held an event called a world tour at the museum. So basically we have our docents introduce part of our museum briefly, and then they will compare this part of the museum regardless of architecture or collection. They will connect this part with the counterpart of their country. So for example, the yellow tiger flag of the Formosan Republic in our museum reminds one of our American students of the American flag in the National Museum of American History in Smithsonian Institute. So this is a very interesting event that we actually see the similarities of Taiwan with other regions. And we also have our students do a tour relay. I hope.
Welcome to National Taiwan Museum. 欢迎你们来国立台湾博物馆。你知道国立台湾博物馆是目前台湾历史最悠久的博物館嗎？係一個連接過去同現代嘅據點。ويكونوا لماذا تدريسهم لماذا تدرسون جنوب الشمس และนี่คือสาเหตุทำไมถึงมีการรับแรงบันดาลใจมาจากตะวันตกโดยตรง Será lo que tratan de zoom en la historia los de amargo. Kaya lang imbis na
It's running. Anyway, so I have the link and I have the QR code and I can share with you. You can play it. It's very interesting that when the same thing is explained in different languages, you get to actually feel it suddenly becomes a different content. It's very interesting. We are not changing the content, but with different, in different languages, you get to see things differently. So in our program, we actually do see it, and I can probably talk more in our discussion part. Okay, let me jump to the next slide. So, so as I said, we also try to use our walking tour to connect our museum system. So in our walking tour, we are not just introducing the museum. This is a picture and a poster, and this is the map we're using where we're doing the walking tour. So we have to walk in the green lines, and then we take a bus at the blue lines. And some pictures, and we mainly focus on the modern history of Taiwan, not the entire history of Taiwan. What I said that we are doing a very interesting walking tour is that we are not just focusing on the museum, we are focusing on Taiwan's history and also Taiwan's modern issues. For example, if you look at the picture at the middle top one, it's an arch. It's an arch built during Qing Dynasty. And you know, women during Qing Dynasty, they don't have much to say in their community until they got an arch like this. But the requirement to get this arch, you have to first get married, and then you have to have your husband die very early, and then you have to keep you know, virtuous, you cannot, you know, marry to other people, and you have to take care of your late husband's family. And also these words had to spread all the way from your region to the emperor. And then the emperor will decide if you're virtuous enough to get such an arch, and that he will grant you a money to build that arch. And after you have that arch, you have the say in the community. So that's how women was doing during Qing Dynasty. And it didn't really get better in Japanese period, although in Japanese period, Taiwanese women get to have more education and they get to have their own work. But we know that during World War II, there is a very severe human rights issue, and that is the comfort woman issue. So that is an issue that actually we are still, you know, looking on right now. And even after World War II, it wasn't getting better because Taiwan has suffered from a very long period of martial law. So basically, you can be arrested with any reason. And there was a very bad situation when women could exchange a part of the sentence into serving in the military brothel. So the military brothel is almost the equivalent of the comfort woman camp in Japanese period. So you see, the last military brothel ended in 1997. It's not very long ago. So you see, there are a lot of things to discuss, and we actually discuss Taiwan's women's rights in front of this arch. And so when we are introducing these things, we try to connect with the modern issues of Taiwan. And also, this is a picture when we are holding TED Weekend celebration, in which we actually cooperated with local high schools. Local high schoolers, they joined in our docent program and introduced the history of Taiwan and give a walking tour to nearly 200 international TED representatives in one day in a cultural excursion. And we are still doing that. So the high school girls, they started to get to know the very interesting part of the nearby history, and they are starting to organize their own walking tours. And challenges, prospects, I'm sorry, I take a little time. So I here share with you a video that you can look later. It's about the prevention, COVID-19 prevention of our museum. So the COVID-19 really, I know it hits us hard. A lot of museums were forced to shut down for a while. In Taiwan, our museum haven't been shut down, but we do have to take a lot of measures to prevent these infections. For example, in late March, we has stopped all physical events, including guided tours, until early June. So I was going to train a new batch of docents in spring, but that was forced to stop. So I pulled off until summer. So this is a poster we used to have, and this is the poster of this year's program, and you can see the difference. So docents in the pictures are wearing face masks, and also we have a newly opened branch, and also we have a mouse clicked in. So it's, you know, trying to tell you that we're doing something virtual. So we are not also only recruiting physical docents, but we are also recruiting virtual docents together. So this is our physical docents. And while we're working, we also live broadcast our course, and we have like online virtual remote docents taking the course. And it's really amazing that we get to know, you know, this method, this platform, using whether Zoom or Google Meet. We actually get to invite speakers from far away in Taiwan, like an indigenous chef in Taidong. And so usually she is too busy to come to Taipei for a lecture, but with, you know, the remote course, she was invited to give, you know, such a course. And also our art designer, who was really busy until the night, so she get to give a little talk during the night with the Google Meet and so on. And also American professor. We don't have enough money for him to buy the flight ticket to Taiwan, and now we can invite him with Zoom or Google Meet. But also this pandemic hit us hard for some small museums, like the Ama Museum in Taipei, just not far from our museum. It's a private museum and is advocating women's rights, especially the comfort woman issue. But because of the COVID-19, they receive much less visitors for a few months, and they now decided that they have to close down. We are not sure when they will reopen, but it's a very beautiful museum, so we are really sad about this news. And this is our walking tour. And also another challenge is climate change, because after the reopening, the first tour we are doing, we have to walk under sun and in 37 degrees Celsius, and that is 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So climate change could also be a challenge for us. So we probably also have to deal with this issue to rearrange or reorganize our walking tour to make it more comfortable for visitors. So far, that's all I would like to share with you. And I'm looking for more questions or discussions. I actually have some more pictures, but probably we can talk about this later. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Phaedra. This is amazing. And sort of like you, we're also seeing the upside of all being virtual to invite speakers from all over the world and across the country to join us. So that has been an upside for us too. I hope Sharon won't feel on the spot. If maybe the first question is, it would be really interesting to hear a little more about your experiences, Sharon, and how they sort of impacted your own thinking about your career and how you do the public humanities. I think that would be, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, sure, not at all. Yeah, so program when I joined in 2017, it was my first ever museum gig, if you would say so. And I feel really lucky to be able to be part of the program, because a little very fun story is that I actually didn't know that the National Taiwan Museum had this program until I went for a run on my university campus, and I accidentally saw the poster recruiting docents, and I just sent out my applications right away. And then I get to meet Phaedra, and just so many young people of my age who are from all different countries and also from Taiwan as well. And we're all very interested in knowing more about Taiwan's history and culture. And especially for me as a Taiwanese person, we have international students as part of the program, but me as Taiwanese, in my tour, I get to share with visitors that as a student in Taiwan, how we get to know about these historical events and what are the narratives out there in our textbooks. And I get to share that with visitors from all around the world, and who either know very little about Taiwan, or who just knew something, but they couldn't really get like a first-hand experience in sharing of a person who has, who's born and raised in Taiwan and very interested in my own culture. And that has been one of the most rewarding experiences for me in this program. And also kudos to Phaedra and also to all the peers in the program. Many of us become really close friends, and we're still in touch till today. And after I've been reflecting a lot, as I should, about educational programs, and especially how different narratives, they sort of construct a different dynamic to the same story. And I think the program is still growing, and so are the tour contents and the insight from docents as well. And it's never like okay, this is how that circle event unfolds and end of story. It's never really like that. And with more input from different docents, and also our own reflections of how we learn about history, it's a really ongoing and organic process that I find, for me, is really rewarding. And I would say, learning from my peers, from my cohort, I'm not the only one who feel like this. And it's been a great experience for me. And as you can learn from this talk, that it's not only just about one specific museum or one specific piece of history in Taiwan. It's actually through this program and through the tour, you get an overview of how Taiwan was like and how Taiwan is like right now. And you get to feel, really immersed in that environment and in all the historical events. And Phaedra has been great, and our docents are, really inviting, and they make sure that what they share with the visitors are all very relevant. And we actually welcome all sorts of discussions around the stories that we cover in the tours. So that has been really great.
Thank you. Sounds like Caroline has a question, so let me, she's unmuted. Yeah, so go ahead, Caroline, for your question.
Oh, I'm just wondering how you would characterize the NTU collection. You have these different museum sites that are specifically identified, and I'm wondering if from what I remember of NTU, there was a lot of ethnographic material in there, and I'm not sure you would call it an ethnographic museum. So I'm wondering if there is one specific characterization. Also, do you use indigenous docents, any of the Aboriginal population?
Okay.
And thanks for a really interesting talk.
Thank you. So may I repeat your question? So first you're asking like which type or category our museum is. And the second is, are we using indigenous docents or members? And so for your first question, our museum is National Taiwan Museum. And I know that in National Taiwan University, they have their university museums, and they're most famous for their anthropology museum. So in Taiwan, there are 3 major museums for anthropology collections and research, and that would be National Taiwan Museum, our museum, because it was founded during Japanese period. I have to admit there might be, or there are ill-gotten collections. And also the second one is the National Taiwan University Anthropology Museum. And the third one would be the Ethnographic or Ethnology Institute of Academia Sinica, the most important research institute in Taiwan. So these 3. And so our museum, there is a period when our museum, National Taiwan Museum, NTM, emphasizes on anthropology collections. But our museum was founded as a natural history museum. So we have zoology, botany, geology, and anthropology collections. And also because it was the most important one during Japanese period. So we actually also have some major historic items. For example, the Kangxi, Taiwan map under Kangxi Emperor's reign during Qing Dynasty, and also the Koshinga's portrait, or the yellow tiger flag of the Formosan Republic, so sort of things. But because, as I said, that our museum also included the nearby cultural heritage sites, and we are introducing the history of those other branches. So our museum is now moving towards a comprehensive museum, represents Taiwan's modernity, because our main building, emphasizes on the past collection and also the current cultural issues. And our second branch emphasizes on natural history, and our third branch emphasizes on industrial history or environmental education. And our fourth branch, because it used to be a railway department for the government, so it also emphasizes on railway culture, and we would say that would be the modernization of Taiwan. So we are now covering a lot of things. And so I would say we are now moving towards a comprehensive museum. So that's for your first question. And for our second question, we do not have any restrictions for the identity of our employers. And for my international docent program, I actually wanted to have to have more indigenous members, but because our museum program, well, for my program, we have a requirement. All the courses are conducted in English. So people who enter the program, they have to be able to communicate and also understand everything in English. And that is not very easy for average students, I have to admit. And so far, we haven't really got students who's actually from an indigenous tribe, but we are connecting with indigenous communities to introduce their culture, and we are trying to see how we can actually help them, or well, they help us, or we cooperate to promote some cultural issues. But recently, like this year in March, we visited a indigenous community that I know, and it's very different that the young people in their community, especially for the community that they emphasizes on cultural revival, the young people don't necessarily want to, move to the city areas and study in the universities. They know that they have other options than just, follow the roots of the city people. They have their own lifestyle. So a lot of young indigenous people who emphasizes more on culture, they actually would stay in their community. So, so I thought it would probably be more effective if we want to, introduce their culture, is for us to actually reach out to them, probably organize more remote sessions, or we have pay visit to the communities. So that's what we are doing. Like next weekend, we are visiting another indigenous tribe in Taidong, the east part of Taiwan. Yeah, so far. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else have any more questions who's part of the group? You can just chat, or even just, I can kind of scroll through and see you. You can use the hand raising function too. Because if not, then I was just curious to hear about programs in the works and sort of what you've got on your plate as you think about the future.
Okay. So, well, I have to admit that training the docents is not very easy, because, for example, if I recruit 30 people into the program, there will be probably only 10 people pass the qualification. Probably I'm quite strict, but so only those who pass the qualification are qualified to give tours. But I know that in the world, especially now, the form of remote communication can be probably a mainstream in near future, and I think there are more things that we can do. So for our this year's summer program, I actually recruited remote students. Obviously, they cannot give tours in our museum, but I'm trying to, invite them to know about Taiwanese culture and probably get inspiration from it, and probably they can produce some very interesting content. For example, for this summer, they have divided into 3 groups. So one of the groups will be working on COVID issue. They are looking for the populations that have been neglected, and they are trying to interview these populations. For example, small children, because they are just going to school, but they can't really go to school like we used to do. So they could be affected. And also sanitation workers. So they've been probably working extra hours or extra efforts to prevent, and they're often neglected. And I think for the role of a museum, also recently in the museum community, we're also talking about the museum's new definition. So I am thinking about exploring that definition with this program, because all the students come into the program regardless of whether they have passed the qualification or not, they're really good people because they would like to spend their spare hours to get to know a subject that they don't know. So I think it's really worth a try to actually come up with that discussion or that definition with my docents for people who join the program. So that's what we are doing. And we are trying out this summer to see if this could work. And in the future, I think there is one little dream when I first started this program. As I introduced you, in Taiwan, actually local people, they have difficulty understanding their own culture and own history because we've been colonized by so many different governments, and for each colonizer they would just try to erase, you know, what previous people have done. And so whenever we are holding our, no matter walking tour or regular tour, there are about at least 1/3 Taiwanese audience, and they will tell us that it's their first time hearing these stories. So this is quite, I wouldn't say scary, but this is very surprising. Although I have to admit, I learned this first time when I entered the museum. So before I entered the museum, I don't know about any of these. And I think another important part, in addition to connecting with the world or different people from different cultural background, another important purpose for this program is to, you know, remind Taiwanese that they can do better in understanding their own history. And for me, when I started this program, whenever I go to a place that I used to think it's boring, I now have a totally different view. Because, you know, when you get to know, you start to know how to read a city, how to read a place. So I really would like to share that part with, you know, people who might have the same interest with me. So namely the docents or people who participate in the program. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for a wonderful talk and for sharing this with us. I think for a lot of people, obviously not Sharon, but it was really new, certainly new to me, the work of the museum, and also sort of thinking about the context. And some of the things that you said are resonating right now as we in America are sort of thinking about whether we retain or demolish or move monuments from the past that are problematic for us today for what they represent. And, you know, some of what you touched on was really interesting, I think, for those of us who are thinking about that question right now in the United States. It sounds like a great program. Looks like everyone has a lot of fun who takes part in it. And I know it's late there, so unless there are any other questions, I think we want to let you get a decent night of sleep at this point.
Oh, thank you. It's all right. I have a day off tomorrow, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for your work and for sharing it with us. You know, and thank you, Sharon, for suggesting Phaedra and for being part of this.
Okay. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.